Did it work? Did it work? Is it like 5th time lucky for me? Am I actually live? I think I'm live. So hello if you are there. I think I'm live now. Okay, beautiful. Yes, I believe I am. If you're watching, please let me know that I'm actually live. This is like the 5th or 6th attempt at it. So let's see if this one works. So hello and thank you for coming along to this live. And if you are watching the replay, please put hashtag replay in the comments. And everyone, just let me know where you're coming from. Let me know you're there, so I know there's actually people on the other end who are watching. It's always so nice to know that you're connecting with people. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Louise O'Reilly and I am an inclusion and diversity coach, mentor and course creator. I do all the things to do with inclusion and diversity, and I am an Aboriginal woman. I am a, excuse me, a Wurrung woman. So talking about historic events that are meaningful to Aboriginal people and culture is something that I like to talk about, especially seeing as a lot of historic events that have happened, there's a lot of misconceptions about what it actually means, what the impacts are, and certainly a misunderstanding of how it is actually still affecting us today or impacting us in our community today. So it's certainly something I like to talk about. And also today is a bit of a day of a celebration as well, because it is an anniversary of the 1967 referendum, and that is something to celebrate. And while we have celebration, we also need to acknowledge that this was something great that happened. There's also a way to go. Hello, good morning. I can see your comments. Hi Shane, hi Maddie. So what we're here today to talk about is the 1967 referendum, and it is the anniversary of that. It happened on the 27th of May in that year. Who would have thought? So what this referendum pretty much did was it removed some provisions in the Constitution that were discriminatory against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So what it did, there were two particular sections that this Constitution did have those discriminations. And what the referendum did was to do two particular things to two sections. So those sections were section 51(26) of the Constitution. And what it says in that particular part is it it was able to make laws with the respect to people of any race other than Aboriginal people in any state, from whom it is necessary to make specific laws, special laws. So what the referendum proposed, and if you're unfamiliar with why we require to have a referendum, we have a constitution. That constitution governs how we do everything in our Australian society today. That governs all the laws, and that's basically like the rule book on how we do things. When the Constitution was created, there was no mindfulness or inclusion of Aboriginal people and culture, because during that time there was this perception, idea, concept, and almost I'm not going to go there. But they essentially thought that Aboriginal people would be essentially bred out, that there would be assimilation, and they would class, full blood Aboriginal people, which is, in all honesty, a very derogatory term. So please don't use it, but this is the terms that they used in the time, would be bred out and they would die. And they used a system of casting. So there would be a half-caste Aboriginal people called quadruplets, I think they called it, something like that. So it's a scaling system based on the colour of the skin. It's a very offensive way of addressing Aboriginal people, because our Aboriginality isn't based on our skin colour. It's based on who we are and our identity, which has nothing to do with the way we look. So there was no mindfulness or inclusion in the Constitution of Aboriginal people, because they thought that it would be complete assimilation, where the Aboriginal people would completely assimilate into white culture and society in its entirety. So what the referendum did was it made the provision to move out this particular line, which was other than the Aboriginal people in any state. It took out that line, so it then read to make laws with respect to people of any race for whom it is necessary to make special laws. So that meant that the federal government could then make laws that included Aboriginal people as well. Prior to this point, laws were made and regulated by states individually, and it was very inconsistent between states, and it's a very power could be used in very interesting ways to make very interesting laws. So I guess making it a constitutional section made it a little bit able to be more regulated. So that was a bonus in itself. And the second part of the referendum was to actually remove one whole section of the Constitution. And that section was 127. Now that section says, in reckoning the numbers of the people of the Commonwealth or of the state or other part of the Commonwealth, Aboriginal natives should not be counted. So that with the referendum being successful and getting a yes vote in that particular time, that meant that section was completely deleted from the Constitution as well. So there is these myths. There are a couple of myths that I want to share with you about what the 1967 referendum is, and then really let you know what it actually is. So there is a myth that the referendum meant Aboriginal people could vote. Now this isn't true, because by 1965, Aboriginal people could vote across all of Australia. And I am coming from WA, so I would like to say in WA, that was in 1962, is when Aboriginal people were able to have the vote in elections. Now, 1962, that's not that long ago. My mum was born in 1962, so we're not talking about past stuff. The creation of the Constitution is a past thing, is something that was quite a fair while ago. Though it's not generations and generations and generations ago. It is fairly recent when you're looking at it at the context of human society across the globe. And it is very recent if you look at Aboriginal society, community, and occupation in Australia. But in terms of the, I guess, contemporary Australia, it seems long, but it's not. It's very, very recent. Another myth there is that in 1967, the referendum meant that Aboriginal people were counted in the census. So again, this is like a half-truth. So what it actually meant was Aboriginal people were already counted, but they were counted separately to all other people. What it meant was then we could be counted with all people. And part of that, so I will skip a little bit, part of that was because in WA and in Queensland, it was very known that there were large populations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in those places. So it was, I guess, politically and economically a good decision, good in inverted commas I'll put, good decision to exclude WA and Queensland from voting and being counted as a voting member, I guess, as a citizen, because that would mean the revenue from the Commonwealth would be separated and go to those particular places that have large populations of Aboriginal people. It also meant that because it reduced the population count in those particular states, that they would have a smaller seat in government as well, in Parliament. So it's not only this concept or this idea of, okay, what is best for our people in our Commonwealth, in our nation, it's also a strategic way of doing things. And this is the Constitution was built strategically too. And that strategy may have worked back then for people who had the biggest voices, had the loudest voices, and they were the people who were most privileged. And Aboriginal people didn't have a voice then. Certainly nothing compared to what we have now, which I'm hugely grateful for. But there is still a way to go. Now, before I go any further, I do actually want to do an acknowledgement of country, because now I've seen a few people have jumped on, so I do want to share that now. So for those of you who aren't aware of what an acknowledgement of country is, it is a beautiful custom that we are starting to learn more and more in white society in Australia, and it's something that we certainly have done and respected in Aboriginal society forever, pretty much. And that is to acknowledge the custodians of the particular places we're on. And so I would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional and ongoing custodians of the lands and waters on which I am on, I play on, I work on, and I thrive with my beautiful family on. And it is to those custodians that I owe a lot of that thriving to, because I know that their role as custodians in this place is their birthright, and their role is to ensure that this place communicates and is in an ecosystem of harmony together on both a very physical space in protecting our lands, our nature, but also on a spiritual plane as well, to make sure everything flows beautifully. And that in turn helps me to thrive and the community to thrive as well. I would also like to pay respects to the elders and thank them for their love, their kindness, their generosity, their leadership, their love. And I would also like to pay respects to the custodians and the elders on the places on which you're on as well, because every place across this planet has custodians. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Acknowledgement of Country, I have 5 educational videos on my page. If you go to videos, you can go and have a look, and there's a series on Acknowledgement of Country if you would like to learn a little bit more about that. But back to the subject at hand. Okay, so with the interesting thing with what section 127 did was it made it easy to say that Aboriginal people didn't count in a certain way. So they didn't count in their voting and didn't count in being included as a person in the census or part of the population of the census. But that in itself made it very easy for Aboriginal people to be seen as not being counted in other spaces as well. And so it made it easy to deny services. So things like pensions or allowances, enlisting for armed forces, cinemas, shops, schools, swimming pools, churches, anything like that, any place that it was public, they had the ability to deny service to Aboriginal people based on their race. What a beautiful thing it did was by winning that 1967 referendum, and that yes vote was a 90.77% yes vote, which is an absolute landslide victory for the yes vote in a referendum. That is absolutely massive, and it's a wonderful example of how a nation can come together to support Aboriginal people and their voices. And something to note from it when we can look back at it, you know, the whole planet didn't change. Everything didn't crumble down. You know, people's lives weren't massively impacted. Constitutionally speaking, it's only actually a small little part that was changed. But sometimes we may hold on to things out of fear of not knowing what that change might create or cause. But I do want to instill this real calmness, or this knowing that the Aboriginal community are gentle, beautiful, amazing people, and we're not bent on the destruction of anyone else. It is calls for equality, and equality doesn't mean pulling down anyone else or meaning anyone else gets lesser than. All equality means is, okay, well, you're getting this level of enjoyment and thriving and privilege in your life, I just want that too. And it's not that from you, it's that too. So it's really not changing people's lives except for those people that we are supporting. Okay, what else do we have? The problem that we have now, so that is a beautiful celebration, and it was a wonderful victory, and it was a wonderful example of how people can come together to change things in the past that no longer work for us, when we are more mindfully inclusive, when we are more of a community, when our community is more diverse and richer, and we are wanting all that diversity and richness to be part of it. So that is something absolutely to celebrate. The thing about it is now is the way the Constitution and the government both addressed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander needs is still quite lacking. And the Constitution still permits laws and policies that discriminate on the base of race. And unfortunately, all of them have been to discriminate against race, rather than what I believe it was probably intended for, was in order to understand that there are additional needs or different needs because of a particular race or because of the circumstances of the occupation of and colonization in Australia. So it's been used in a way that has been interpreted, in my opinion, in the way it shouldn't have been. So it's very discriminatory. And the thing about how we are in Australia now is because the population of Aboriginal people are such a small percentage. So we're approximately, 3% of the population of Australia. So when you have these policies and laws that can discriminate on race and create policies and acts that are specific to a certain race, and especially when it's a way that is negatively impacting that community in some way, even if every single member of the Aboriginal community voted and were registered to vote, that's a whole nother story in itself, the complexities around that, we still don't have the majority. So 97% of the population get to vote on acts and policies and things that impact Aboriginal communities solely, or that impact Aboriginal communities in ways that are quite often unseen or unknown by the wider population. And this is because we do have different cultural systems, we have different laws, we do have different ways of doing things. And because of that, unknowing of how it impacts Aboriginal communities, sometimes things are passed that are really seemingly innocent or seem okay, but until you understand deeper the culture, you don't understand the impacts it has in those communities. And quite often your vote that you're doing can really deeply negatively impact Aboriginal communities. So what we're kind of looking for is a voice to Parliament, a space where Aboriginal people can come and inform how certain legislations, policies and acts will impact the Aboriginal community. And then with that deeper awareness of what the impacts are going to be directly to that particular community, that awareness can go out, and then voting can be made with and it's an educated vote. It's not just based on assumptions or this idea of, okay, well, this is my culture that I live in, this is all I know about. It's more about, let's expand it to understand deeper the other cultures and Aboriginal cultures. And then with that, with my value system, I can vote based on that new knowledge. So it is really an empowering process for everyone if there is a Aboriginal voice to Parliament, because then that means you'll be more informed about your own voting and how it actually impacts your community members as a whole. Now, we do actually have something at the moment. I know a lot of you may have heard of things like all these little statements that have gone to the King or the Queen asking for different rights of Aboriginal people. We have one that is currently out now. And if you haven't heard of it, it's called the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Now, if you excuse me, I'll have a quick sip of water and check the comments, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Okay, so the Uluru Statement from the Heart, it was released on the 26th of May in 2017. So it's been a little while since it has been released, and it is gaining lots of momentum, and it's looking for support of Australian people to support this particular statement. And what it calls for is voice, treaty, truth. So it calls for a voice to Parliament. It calls for a treaty with Aboriginal people, or many treaties, whatever is the most appropriate for those agreements to happen. And it also asks for a process of truth-telling about Australia's history and what has happened and what is happening. And I guess that will help us to inform and the way we want to create our future together and innovate something that is mutually beneficial where we can all thrive. So I want to actually leave this off by reading the Uluru Statement to you. It is a little lengthy, but it is so beautiful, and I think it's just a wonderful statement. If you do love the Uluru Statement and you agree with it, you can go and sign the petition to say that you support it as well. And I will leave all the links in the comments section after I get off this as well. Okay, so this is the Uluru Statement. We gather at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent lands, and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did according to the reckoning of our culture, from the creation according to the common law from time immemorial, and according to the science more than 60,000 years ago. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion. The ancestral ties between the lands, or Mother Nature, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom remain attached thereto and must one day return hither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That a peoples possess a land for 60 millennia, and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years. With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionately, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not innately criminal people. Our children are aliened from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. And our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crises tell plainly the structural nature of the problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people to take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is a culmination of the agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fairer and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. I thank you all so much for coming and listening today. Like I said, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. I will be giving another live tomorrow, a little bit later tomorrow, on Reconciliation Week, because today is the start of Reconciliation Week. So this is a very exciting week, and it is certainly not a week that is just for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It is about the coming together. So thank you so much. Sending you so much love. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now.